Hello, and welcome to ICA in Conversation that broadcasts on the second and fourth Wednesdays of each month, focusing on current issues and challenges in the context of compliance and counter financial crime. I'm Tim Tyler, and coming up, we're going to consider how the Arctic has become a testing ground for sanctions evasion, illicit financial flows, and geopolitical competition, all playing out against a backdrop of accelerating mineral extraction and military positioning. To do this, I'm delighted to be joined by Ilia Shumanov. Ilia is the former executive director of Transparency International, Russia. He now leads Arctida, an organization that investigates corruption, sanctions evasion, and environmental and human rights issues in the Russian Arctic, and one that has been designated by Russia as, quote, an undesirable organization. As ever, we would love to hear from you wherever you join us from across the world. And of course, we're mindful also that many will be watching this to the future within the ICA Learning Hub or across the platforms that we share this podcast through. So welcome. And Ilia, welcome to you. Thank you so much for taking this time to join us for this conversation.
Thank you, Tim, for this invitation. So I'm very proud to be here because I'm also the person who attended the course of international compliance session. So Arctic is my main focus now. Let's talk.
Fantastic. And this is an area that I expect many those listening now into the future may know something about, but probably not very much. So, can I start by asking about that move that you made? So, of course, you were the lead for Transparency International Russia, and you moved from that role to lead Arctida. Before we talk about the challenges that we face there, can I ask you personally, what was driving that move for you?
So it was quite interesting move for me personally because I was a director of Transparency International for many years, and just before the full-scale invasion, I visited Russian Arctic, some of the Russian regions, and I compared this region with like this region that I saw like just across the border in Norway, in Sweden. And so it's quite a big disaster I observed in Russian territories. And actually, this was one of the main triggers for me to start digging deeper why it's happening, why so amazing and so rich territories and so rich regions. They're just in very like abundant situations. They're quite like poor comparing to other regions, and that's main reason for me to start investigate this region. And also previously, when I was in a position as a director of Transparency International Russia, we did several projects related to ecological and climate things. So, and it was also the second trigger for me because this topic was one of my interests as well. So I can investigate why I'm not like focusing on something very specific related to Russian illicit financial flows and sanction evasion. So that was like some sort of the intellectual startup that we started in 2021, 2022. So, and it was like now it is like the full capacity organization that is doing their work like as one of the leader of Russian intellectual think tanks that focusing on specific geographical location.
So you've mentioned, or we've mentioned Arctida. It's worth highlighting that you have a very strong website that sets out some of the work that you're currently doing, some of the investigation, some of the reports that you've published. Very worth a visit, very well worth a visit. But before we start talking about the challenges themselves, it's worth just pausing, I think, to highlight what do we mean by the Arctic. So I've got a map in front of me, and it highlights that nearly geographically, in terms of territory, nearly half sits with Russia, I think, and Canada, a very large slice, the US in Alaska, another slice, Greenland, a large part, and then the remaining sort of fragments sit with Iceland and Finland. But it's a huge territorial area that, of course, is going through a great deal of change, in part because of global warming, potentially opening up routes. So that's I hope, an accurate overview. Um, what are the key issues that you've identified within that territory that give concern? And that's a huge question, of course, but how would you break them down?
It's a complicated question, but I will try to answer on it. So actually, we can watch an Arctic just like not as a, like some sort of geographical location, some exotic geographical location that many of us have never been. Like, but like for me, it's kind of 60% of Russian territory actually, if you're
Oh, wow.
geographically, yeah. So
Wow.
it's quite big, and it's like more than 50% of the coastline of the whole Arctic, the global Arctic. So Russia, it's like main part of the Arctic Circle coastline. It means Russia, like at least can be like perceived as a kind of the big part of the global community in a sense of the geopolitical maybe perception. And of course, I understand that Arctic Council is the main organization that actually governs the Arctic issues, and Russia was the part of the Arctic Council. Actually, is not in a very condition now because Russia was like partially frozen from being the part of this community, not like kick out like in many international organizations, but frozen, and only I think so barely maybe two working group are still able to work with Russia, and they're not like main groups. It's more about biodiversity and about forest things and other, like when Russia is still present. Like regarding to this, I can say that Russian Arctic like still interconnected with a number of the territories, especially the neighbors like Norway, Finland, like United States, and the countries that are not like connected directly with Arctic, but they call themselves, for example, like a China near-Arctic state. There is a huge interest to Russia, to Russian Arctic from UAE, for example, or India, because of natural resources, because of logistic, and so interconnection with climate change, as you mentioned previously, is one of the like maybe one of the turning points for the numbers of observers. So what we are seeing now in Europe, there is a heat waves that happening like from year to year and it's increasing. It's also related to transformation of the uh, like let's say permafrost degradation, yeah, climate change, and so on so far. And for me, some of the indicators in personal communication, for example, I visited several times the United States and United States officials, like from the new term of Donald Trump, it's also one of the priority, and the United States is one of the like main leaders for the global geopolitical maybe road, yeah, or like way. So that's why so it's also like kind of like in the mains in the center of the like geopolitical discussion. And what's happened with Greenland, it's also one of the example of this. I mean, like in the public discussion about the possible uh, transformation of the status of the Danish territory, like the Greenland.
So what I think you're describing is the Arctic as a sort of melting pot for geopolitical challenges. and very different geopolitical stances, I expect, contained within that. But that's overlaid with the complexity of access to minerals and separately trade routes and the opening opportunity to exploit new minerals. Now, I understand on the minerals that it's not so much the oil that was once thought to be the future of the Arctic in terms of its extraction. It's actually other minerals, rare minerals, and so on, that are more likely to attract the interest of geopolitical players.
Yeah, that's the good point, but not for Russian Arctic, unfortunately. Maybe Donald Trump will be much more like maybe focused on Russia if there will be this opportunity to work with Russian rare earth minerals and metals. Actually, there is only several like extractive points for these minerals in Russia, and they're quite expensive, much more expensive than in other regions like Brazil, for example, or like even the Greenland. From my perception, it's much more expensive. So for Russia, it's more about oil and gas
Ah,
and
okay.
yeah, and like other mineral resources that we couldn't name as rare earth metals, like nor nickel that produce like in the coal mining and so on so far, but not about the rare earth metals because we have only two main like extractive places for these metals, and like it's very a small amount comparing with the other regions and comparing with other countries. So that's like we can be sure here that Donald Trump will not like demand this step. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just give you a moment, Ilya. So, if I may, I'd just like to talk about some of the specifics of what you and what Arctida are seeing at the moment. The website shows a number of ongoing investigations and reports, and they relate to sanctions evasion and failed infrastructure investment, corruption. There's reference to nuclear energy risk, which I was a little surprised by, but and we could talk about any one of these, of course. Is there one that perhaps stands out for compliance professionals that would be useful for us to have a little better understanding?
Yes, actually, my experience of communication with compliance professionals is quite like very has very wide range of the questions. The main question I was asking regularly is about supply chains because supply chain is
Mm.
like one of the like critical point for the international trade, and Russia is was and is involved in this supply chain for many years, and you couldn't cut this like because of the oil, because of the gas, and because of the number of the minerals that Russia produce. The second question is a big infrastructure projects like Arctic LNG 2, for example, Yamal LNG, where we are still having some of the like international or like let's say European or like Chinese shareholders, and it's also kind of a big issue for the compliance because it's about funding, it's about revenue, and it's about dividends and so on. And maybe the role of China is quite important here, as well as third parties that are not Russian but like Russia connected, like Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. So it's like the countries that could facilitate and that facilitate with dual use products, for example, or sanction evasion mechanism. So as well as shadow fleet, because it's very interconnected with international trade, and now it's like one of the like hitting point for international sanctions. for the Russian international sanctions, and it's like the one maybe of the ways how Russia could withstand and how Russia could continue to sell oil and gas products, not within the country, but like for the international buyers.
And your website makes reference to not only the shadow logistics, but also hidden ownership structures, concealing, well, just that, concealing ownership. Can I ask then, from the perspective, we've talked about compliance professionals, from their perspective, if they see something within, for instance, a supply chain, or in the context of maybe a sanctions investigation or a possible sanctions investigation or due diligence inquiries, if they see something where there is some kind of a footprint within the Arctic in any of those jurisdictions, would you have any suggestions, any thoughts around the sorts of things they should have in mind or where they might go for further information?
Yes, Tim. Yeah, this is a very $100 question, let's say, because actually the one of the like way how we are screening like companies doing the procedures of the KYC or due diligence procedures, it's like very formal way of checking companies or individuals. And unfortunately, using this methodology, we are not able to reveal hidden layers of the ownership or hidden layers of the like maybe trade routes or supply chain, or especially circumvention of the export control. Yeah, and my point and my maybe recommendation is not do this as a formal checking boxes like many of the companies doing, but try to maybe to invest into some evidence-driven mechanism or AI-driven technology. So there are plenty of the companies that provide these services. Maybe it's also trying to maybe revise the country risk methodology because like it's very formal list of the countries that we are like trying to maybe to use to like to try to do enhanced due diligence procedures because of the country risk. But now it's not like that because many countries could facilitate sanction evasion.
Mm.
Yeah, and maybe the role of individuals. So since you're like could establish or like identify the ultimate beneficial ownership and you have the proofs of this, unfortunately, this could be not true. This could be the nominee. It could be like some like nominee shareholders or like very like not related person
Yes.
to politically exposed individuals, but doing like additional checks and additional investigation, we can find out that this is like the real nominee of some like wealthy Russian individual, sometimes oligarch, sometimes politically exposed person, and so on and so far. And we often we underestimate the role of the special services of Russia, who are actually using these SPV vehicles, like or like for example, some of the companies as national security threats. It's additional question. It's not related directly to maybe to compliance thing, but like for me, it's also the one of the concerns that people trying to address because bringing someone on board with this national security risk, for example, for bank or for any other like financial institution, it's like the big red flag. It could be like prosecuted like from the different side, not from the compliance, not by financial conduct authority, but through other regulators. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
my recommendation.
So we need to look beyond the obvious and not just take that tick box approach of, well, we've been given this information and it's about going further and deeper. And I think it's a good time to mention the company that you lead because I know that that's something that you do. And you offer a service to investigate and, for instance, look for assets or potential sanctioned activity within Russia. And there are very few that are effectively able to do that. Again, we're not here to promote your company, but what is the name of that company? And is that a good description of what you do?
Yeah, it is called TriTrace Investigations, and this is like very like it's in a few words, it's a like boutique investigative company. So we are doing investigation for international clients, those who are interested in like understanding Russia, supply chain analysis, ultimate beneficial ownership, asset tracing, and maybe power mapping. Sometimes it's like beyond the like compliance procedures because it's like about deep investigation, about like deep understanding of the process. But like a lot of international companies, they're locked in Russia because of because of the sanction, because of the Russian new regulation about these companies, they couldn't leave Russian market. And for this organization, for top managers, for compliance officers, it's quite important to have direct access to data, to have full understanding of the picture, who is responsible for what, like what is like new regulation, what is coming from, and so on and so far. So, but like it's only like the one of the examples. So for those who are interested in Russian trail, so sometimes it's impossible to maybe to trace some of Russian assets abroad. Some of the people they think that they're onboarding some Kazakhstan clients or Uzbekistan clients or like anywhere clients, but this is a Russian money that came from like with the different flags. Like it's also the big issue, and so I'm with my colleagues, we are doing this research and helping professionals to mitigate these risks.
Okay, thank you. That makes good sense. And as you said before, it's an important service um, meeting a particularly challenging issue where not just Russia, but some of those other jurisdictions that you touch upon become involved, whether that's a supply chain or due diligence or elsewhere. So we've talked just briefly about some of the challenges that the Arctic faces. And you've highlighted the complexity around that, both geopolitically, but also in terms of trade, minerals, and so on. We haven't talked about the impact of all of this on indigenous individuals, people who are living within that, who may technically be within Russia or Finland or another territory, but possibly aren't even particularly aware of that, but because they have their own life. What does that impact look like? Because I know that's one of your concerns, and it's mentioned within the Arctida website.
Yeah, it's a good question because that's like the main reason why I'm working with Arctida and why we establish this organization. So Arctic is not about only about geopolitical things, not about money, not about the sanctions and oil and gas and rare metals and so on. It's about people. So the people are living there. They're suffering every day. They are just losing hope because of like activity of the international corporation of Russian state-owned companies of the shadow fleet and so on so far. And actually, this is like one of the main concerns that Arctida focus on. In every our project, in every our investigation, we try to add this additional point of view to show people maybe who are focusing about sanction, about the oil and gas, about like Russian national security threats, that this is like the individual or like indigenous point of view and how international sanction, how like any activities could destroy the environment of these people. One of the examples I would like to provide. The one of the first our investigation was related to Tiger Alcohol. It's Australian company that mined extracted coal from far east of Russia in Chukotka. It's somewhere like close to the United States. We received a signal from the people who are living on the ground, that they are suffering. There is a coal problem. They have they open fish, and there is a black fish inside because of the coal activity, the coal mining activity. So there's real suffering, people, the black lungs, the cancer, and so on and so far. And we sent expedition to this place. Of course, it was not with only we are sending expedition. We did it afterwards. We named that it was expedition. The people came to this place. They made a lot of photos, video materials, and we found out that really it was real problem for local people because of activity of international company, Australian company that actually did not comply with corporate social responsibilities without they did without any formal restrictions even imposed by Russian legislation. So, and the activity of the concrete of the specific company led to the destroying of the community, of the local community. And this could be named and this could be revealed only by our work, only because of our activity, only because we came here, we can we could share this with the world. And afterwards, there is a formal investigation started by Australian authorities because of the sanction violation of these companies. And the people, at least they understood that someone is interested in this activity, that the people will know about these problems. So it's one of the small examples of our work on the ground, how we can do, and this is a formal case that we can show that international compliance organization or international compliance specialists, they can use these case studies as a toolkit for them, to understand that a company in front, it could be very nice company with a good website with a good reports, but on the ground that something happening, and the lack of access to the real activity of the company sometimes gives us very strange picture, or very nice picture, but instead of this, something bad happening on the ground.
So that's a good example of the kind of work that you're doing that's led to real change. In this instance, the Australian authorities are having a close look at the company and their activity. And we know, of course, and you'll be aware from the ICA qualification that you've done, that you were kind enough to mention, that of course, across much of the world, we have an ESG, environmental, social governance mandate that we're required to follow. And that would be very particularly concerned around this sort of issue. But can I ask, was that company, I think you mentioned that it was operating near to Alaska, or
Yeah.
where was that company operating? Was it in Russia or was it in the US?
No, this company operated in Russia,
In
in
Russia, okay.
Chukotka. Yeah, this after the formal investigation in Australia, company was forced to leave Russia. They sold their assets to some Russian company, and so they left market. But before that, for 2 or 3 years after the start of full-scale invasion, after the imposing sanction by the
Mhm.
Australian authorities, they still continue work. through the
Wow.
very complex scheme. Like it was not only Russia, Australia, the direct trade, because it's easy to reveal, but through the Cyprus subsidiaries and very opaque structure that like resell like this coal to like some other like countries. Like it's not easy to reveal this if you are not like
Mm,
digging deeper. Like.
mm.
Mhm.
And of course that as we come towards the end, that I think highlights the importance of the work that Arctida, and it's actually very similar to Transparency International. Much of what you do is to shine a light on criminality, corruption, sanctions evasion, money laundering, um, any other criminal activity, for instance, associated with trade. And that's a great example of doing just that. Lobbying, perhaps, publishing reports, but ultimately it's about exposing what's going on at a level that perhaps wouldn't otherwise reach the public consciousness. Is that a fair description, Ilya?
It's fair description, especially regarding to the my presence in the board of Transparency International Russia. So I'm still board member of this amazing organization. So I'm in touch with the Transparency International UK colleagues because they're doing a lot of internal UK work and external related to the illicit financial flows, related to the property market, related to the financial service providers, and so on so far. So, and I think that's the bringing more light to the very complex environment sometimes gives a lot of new results and new pivots that could be used by compliance professionals.
And that I think is a really good note to finish on, recognizing that what we're talking about now might feel like it's a long way away geographically and conceptually to a certain extent, but actually it's a very real issue that we face within compliance. And of course, we've illustrated that by talking about, well, sanctions is one area, supply chain is another, the changing nature of trade and the way that that can have an impact within crime as well. So thank you for shedding some light on these areas. Is there any last thought that you'd like to share before we do bring this to a close?
Yes, my last thought. So, from the start of this podcast, I'm thinking a bit, and I think that that cooperation between business and non-profit organizations could be like could be much more. Maybe broader, like bigger, like extensive, because now we are seeing like there are two bubbles. Sometimes there is a interconnection between them, but mostly they're like the professional, they're just turning in their own bubbles, and there is no cooperation between them. And I think so that the potential for this cooperation could decrease risks for the like economy, for the trade, and like and provide additional examples and additional tools for professional from the both sides of this cooperation.
Ilya, thank you, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's worth saying that Transparency International partners with, sorry, the ICA partners with Transparency International UK. That's an important partnership for us, and we support their work. I personally am a member of Transparency International for what it's worth. But I think there's opportunity maybe for you and I to have another conversation about how we can support and maybe shed more light on the work that you're doing. Of course, that's not for now, but in the meantime, and for the moment, can I just bring this to a close by saying thank you, sincerely thank you, not just for joining me today, but for the important work that you're doing. I'm sure I echo the thoughts of those listening in at the moment, but also those that will be listening to the future when I say that we are sincerely grateful for your work within Transparency Russia, but also your work currently within Arctida. So thank you, Ilya, for your time and for all that you've done.
Thank you.
And thank you, wherever you are in the world, in joining us today. We hope this has been useful. I hope that we'll hear a little more from Ilia again at some point in the future. But that's a conversation that I think we need to have in the next weeks. For the moment, though, wherever you are in the world, do take care. Bye bye.